So, talk about Paul personally for a second. He was the ambassador of wrestling. He loved to talk to anybody and everybody that would come to the office or try to interview him or whatever. He loved to spread the good word and goodwill of wrestling. But he was an interesting guy, and you know, we'll get into his. He was born in New York in 1912. He turned pro as a wrestler in 1932. He wrestled all around the country, but he also, as an infantryman, in World War II, he won the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart. He was the most decorated professional wrestler to serve in World War II. He wrote a couple of books. Right. He wrote poetry. He was well educated. And when Morris Siegel, who had been promoting since 1915, kind of took a liking to him, he was using him on top in the main events when he had that car wreck in 1947, right. Ended his wrestling career. He had to have something to fall back on. He was so glib, they made him the radio announcer.
Well, you know, it was an accident that they made him a radio announcer, because Paul walked by and the radio announcer didn't know any of the holds. And didn't know what, you know, right. He's watching the matches and he's calling the matches, but he didn't know any of the holds. So Paul sat down next to him and tried to tell him what the holds were. The guy gave him the microphone. So Paul just took over. So that was actually an accident that Paul kind of fell into that job, and then from there it was television came along, he became the television announcer. But you know, Paul Boesch was a rare breed, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Paul Boesch giving me my break. But it's funny, you know, you talk about Paul being educated. Paul never went to college. Paul, I don't even know if Paul finished high school, but he was a self-educated man. Yeah. Self-made, went into the service and did what he needed to do. He loved wrestling, but he learned, and one thing that I think anybody that was around Paul for any length of time was you give back. And that was like just a simple lesson that I got from him, Jim McInville, anybody that got to be around Paul in a business light and get to learn that philosophy, was you give back to your community. You take care of everything around you. And if you take care of your house and you take care of those around you, they're going to take care of you in return.
All the great old-time promoters really had that philosophy because they knew that the wrestlers would come and go,
right?
But they were going to be there. And Eddie Graham learned from Dory Funk Sr., who started the Boys Ranch out in Amarillo.
Yep.
And Eddie Graham took the Florida Boys Ranch, took the concept and helped establish that. And he was always on TV getting some kind of award or trophy or whatever from some community organization or some charitable group. And Paul, and I mean, he didn't do it just for publicity, but he was. You know, wrestling now, especially these days, has such a reputation. But Paul was a member of the community that not only did everybody know and saw him on television every week, but he was friends with George Bush, the old man, not the son that crashed the global economy. But
easy, Tiger.
Yeah. But he had important friends in Houston at the time. Was one of the biggest cities, still is, obviously, but it was, you know, one of the biggest cities in the state of Texas. And he knew a lot of the important people, whether it be the newspaper people or whether it be business people around town, so he could get the sponsorships. People weren't embarrassed to do business with Paul Boesch the way that they might be some just generic wrestling promoter these days.
You know, you talk about sponsorships and television. The television deal was a barter deal where the television station produced a show for us. They came out and taped it, recorded it, put it on the air, 2 hours every Saturday and Sunday. In exchange, we got to sell advertising time. Now, Paul essentially gave the advertising to the station. What Paul got in return was that free advertising for the shows every Friday night.
Yeah.
So it's a 2-hour commercial for what's going to be next Friday night. There was a waiting list to be a sponsor on Houston Wrestling, and he would only have one car dealer. He would only have one lawyer, one jeweler, one furniture guy. And when they would drop out, man, boy, the next one was right there to step in. So whenever we had, like I said, the car dealerships or what have you, there was always 2 or 3 waiting in the wings going, hey, is there any chance we can get on Houston Wrestling? Because to stand there next to Paul and have Paul endorse you, that was gold.
Well, and also, and we'll skip ahead.